Welcome back to the Tell Me More podcast, where we invite you to be a part of real conversations with real women as we navigate the normal thoughts, feelings, and events in life as Christians. I'm Jess McKinney, one of your co-hosts for this podcast.
And I'm Lydia Florence.
I'm still Sarah Hopkins.
Yes, you are. Today's episode, we wanted to talk about body image because this is a very pervasive topic that surrounds a lot of us women, well, men too, but a lot of us women from a very early age, and it never goes away. And we don't talk about it very often. We just kind of deal with our own insecurities. So we wanted to talk about that and have a good conversation about it. And to do so, we invited one of the most confident women that we know to join us to talk about this. We have Rebecca Hatton with us. Rebecca, we're so glad you're here.
Wow.
No pressure.
It's
Don't
such
you
a
dare
good
falter.
thing, though. It's such a good thing. Oh my gosh. Do you want to tell everybody maybe just a little bit about yourself? I'm going to ask you to tell them how old you are also, and
Okay.
then we'll go from there.
I noticed y'all didn't tell how old.
We can
That
say
was
it
in the
again.
first
We did in an
episode.
earlier episode, so we've yeah.
They made me embrace
Oh,
my
gosh.
almost 40ness. So
That's
yeah, here we are.
awesome. Almost 40-ish?
Almost.
Yeah, she's not there
Okay.
yet.
Not there yet.
All right. Well, my name's Rebecca Hatton, and I've been around Southland since 1971, if that tells you anything. I'd love to tell you I was like freshly born, but that would be a lie. But I've spent about 21 years on Southland staff before I retired about a year ago. And I worked in various areas, but wound up here for the last 2 years doing care and pastoral kind of things. And before that, I had about a 20-year career in communications in the political world. So that uniquely qualifies you for ministry, right? And so anyway, but I've been retired for about a year now. I am 62 years old, about to be 63 in August. So, you know,
for you.
but I'm all good with that.
See, and that's why you're here. I
Okay.
was not embracing my
She
age,
is,
so
she is struggling.
You going to cross some great divide?
it's true. I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Wait
I
till you
think
turn 60.
I was going to say, I think I'll probably get to 40 and be like, oh, this is even better than 30, because I was telling them a lot of
40
great
was
things happened
awesome.
in 30.
40
Yeah.
isn't bad.
Yes,
It depends who
no.
you're around. I will say that there are predominantly women who will make you feel like, oh,
Yeah.
your best days are behind you. It's either that or the extreme of you've just begun and you're sitting there going, I don't know how to process any of this.
Right.
Which there's no good middle, it feels like a lot of times.
Well, I do have people calling me middle-aged all the time, so that doesn't help. But
Yeah.
it's because they love me, right?
Yeah, that's why.
Okay, so we when we did our first episode, we asked each other really ridiculous questions to let the audience get to know us. So we thought we'd pick a couple of those and ask you those questions, which actually I think these are pretty mild
They were
compared to the
tame.
ones that we had
Yeah,
to
they
answer.
are.
So you're welcome for that.
I can't wait to hear that.
Okay, so the first question, describe your perfect day. Anything you want to do, it's yours. The world is your oyster. What would you do?
My perfect day is always going to be at a beach.
Yes.
The sun will be shining. It will be about 80 degrees, and the water will be about the same temperature. And I will just be laying there baking,
Yep.
thinking
love
about
that.
Jesus and baking. Listen, if
love
we
that so
lived at the
much.
beach, I'd be that leathery old woman that you see going up
I have a
and down
good
with a metal
picture for
detector,
you, yes.
probably. Because I can't stay out of it. It's just so beautiful, and you know, that's.
Well, our listeners can't
what God
see you,
made
but
me.
they should know that you have a golden glow today.
Oh,
That
my
you walked
word,
in and
yes.
we were all like, "Whoa, have you been
Yeah.
on vacation?"
Yes.
Several times. The glory of retirement. Yes.
Love that.
Yes.
I love that. I just looked at her like, do you want to ask the next question? And she doesn't have the question for her. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Okay. Do you have a nickname?
Oh, Lord.
And if so, where did it come from?
Oh, dear.
What does Greg call you?
Greg calls me Red.
Red.
I like that.
Oh, that's cute.
based on both the color of my hair and my neck. And I want you all to know that I'm redder than I pay to be on all aspects. But
hilarious.
that's the name that he always calls me, and several people have picked that up as well. My family calls me Boo Boo.
Okay.
Yes, I used to love, I guess as a kid, play peekaboo with my sister and brother who were older than me. And so they would always call me Boo Boo, and they still do. I hope it's not because that was some sort of mistake or something. I know it was a surprise, apparently, but anyway, they call me Boo Boo.
I love that.
That's cute.
It's really
I'm
cute.
going to think of that every time I see you from now on.
See her in Danville. Scream it.
Yes, I will. That'd be so great. That'd be my favorite moment. Okay.
Now y'all know.
Okay, last question. Do you have any irrational fears? Not based on science, not normal, just totally irrational. And if you do, what is it?
Yeah. About the only irrational fear I have is of heights.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, like and not just being up high, but being up high and not having like a fence to protect me from falling over the edge or, something like that.
I think that's super rational.
Yeah.
I mean, it messes with me. But other fears that I've had throughout my life, I've just asked Jesus to deal with as he sees fit. But yeah, I haven't, I just avoid being
good.
in those kinds of
Yeah.
places.
Do you fly? How's flying for you? If
Yeah,
you're afraid of
flying's
heights?
okay. I've got the metal of the plane around me at
All
least.
right. Yeah.
But if I am someplace where I'm up high and I can see the ground, but I can't see my, like a staircase and
Yeah.
a hold on to the
Yeah.
side, that kind of thing.
So, like a roller coaster, would you ride that?
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got the
You're strapped
car.
in, you're
Yeah,
fine.
Like not a big Grand Canyon gal, I'm guessing.
Probably not. I would look at it from back away from the
Yeah.
edge, but,
I get
I would
that.
just
You're not
have
going
to
out on
take
the
that
glass
in from
platform?
afar. Going out where?
On the glass platform.
Oh, not ever. I don't know who does that. That's just,
Thrill seekers.
Yeah.
But see, that seems like a respectable
junkies.
fear to me.
I think
does.
it's not like
It's protection.
the sinkholes
Yeah. Or the
or
grates.
3D
Yeah.
printers, Sarah.
I just don't understand them.
Yeah.
They look like
I'm
witchcraft.
just not a super fearful
favorite.
person in
No,
general.
that's great. That's great. Yeah.
Which is why you're here. Because isn't all insecurity just rooted in fear?
Amen. Yes.
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
As is all control. Need for control is rooted in fear.
Preach.
So that's what we do when we get afraid.
Yeah, that's
You know,
true.
I'll just cling on tightly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's important for us talking about insecurities and things like that to also note that when we say you're one of the most confident women we know, it's because you are at peace with who you are, or that's what we see. Like we see the Lord's peace in you with who he created you to be. And that kind of confidence is what comes out. And I think that's what I want to have people see in me, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what we all want. So just gleaning from each other's experience on what have you struggled with and how have you overcome it, and what has the Lord said to you to give you that contentedness, that kind of stuff. That's where I'm hoping to go with this conversation. So that's
How
what I
long's
mean
your
by
podcast?
that. We have
Days
as
and
long as you
days.
want,
Yeah.
girl. We could make it a
Because,
two-parter. We'll see.
63 years is a lot.
Yeah.
I know it. I know
There's
it.
a lot of sacrifice
A
in
lot
that.
of work has been done.
Yes, for sure. Well, and it never stops either, right?
Right.
That's what I'm
No.
told. It
No,
just keeps
not
going.
ever.
So until we
Not
have those
ever.
perfect bodies the Lord made for us.
That's right.
Yep.
So we'll see. All right. Well, maybe let's start with talking about what we see or experience ourselves, women struggling with today, body image wise. And this could be anything. I think it can be the way you feel about yourself, or the whole comparison game that people play, or just having, I wish I was 4 inches taller. It could be anything. But what are you seeing people struggle with, especially within your age group, but also over your experience in life?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is not unique to my age group. I feel like this is every age group of women, but weight is a huge thing, you know, just whether that's how much do you weigh, what's the shape of your body, like is the plumpness in all the right places or not. And so that's not unique to my age and stage, but that's, I think, one of the biggest ones that I just see everywhere and have certainly struggled with myself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like no matter how much we've talked about it, we never seem to make any progress of getting rid of that.
Yeah.
Like I know from growing up that what is a healthy mindset, what is not. I know watching my mom, I know all of that doesn't move the dial at all, which is super frustrating that I have all of this knowledge and yet my insecurities still flare up on a daily basis of what is attractive, what is acceptable, what is all of those things, and where even it's like a mist. You can't grasp it. No one can really tell you. It's really frustrating.
And it adapts over time. I'm giving it like a percentage, which it's not. But, you've seen it, like if you go back 100 years and fast forward to the future, you've seen the ideal change so many times. And then as you age, your body also changes. And so then you are dealing with new things. So there's all of these unknowns that are coming at you. And I get overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, the
sometimes.
culture shifts some. So in the Renaissance period, a woman who was round and rotund was the sexy image, right? That's what I see in art museums and all that kind of thing. And then we get about 50 years later into the 19th century, the mid even 20th century, and Marilyn Monroe was the ideal, right? She was curvaceous, she was beautiful, she was, all of those things, but not a tiny little woman at all. And then about 20 years after that, we moved to, and you all are all probably too young to remember this, from the 70s, there was a model named Twiggy.
Yeah, I know Twiggy.
I know Twiggy.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was stick thin, all that stuff. That was the standard.
Yeah.
And so we've morphed from that to you still need to be Twiggy, but you need to be full chested. You need to look like you're going to topple over if somebody doesn't hold you up. You know what I mean? And so that's the standard kind of these days it seems like we look at, or that has been held up as the ideal.
Yeah.
Not that it is.
Right.
Or we just throw it out and there is
Yeah.
no standard and you can be as unhealthy as you want and that's fine. And then you're looking at going, well, that's not true because the Lord does command us to take care of our bodies because they are a gift.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so it's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like it always comes down to the comparison issue, though, doesn't it?
It does.
Like we look around at other people and we go, "Oh, I'd love to have Jess's hair, and I'd love to have, 4 more inches of height." I
Amen.
wouldn't hardly weigh anything if I could grow 6 inches.
I'd love to look like Kate Middleton.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
figured
ideal.
over the course of my life, I've lost about 400 pounds, so I really don't weigh anything. So I should be good with it by now.
Oh my gosh. Well, one of the questions I was going to ask is where the pressure comes from. And I do think it's that standard, who determines the standard, which I guess we could go down a whole road with that. But where does that come from and why, if we all struggle with it so much, have we not gone, hey, no, this is not okay. Why did we give into it?
I mean, well, gosh, like, I feel like I can speak for my generation in this regard, like, being among the first to have grown up with, like, from a young age, social media, digital pornography, just, media, whether that's TV, movies, whatever, everywhere, where the female body has always been sexualized, through the ages, but it's never been as pervasive and handheld as it has in the last 25 years. And so with the creation of the smartphone and just access to the internet, like the pressure comes from all of those things, I think. And like the exposure to digital pornography, the exposure to social media and influencers and even the cosmetic surgery industry that has become way more common and way more available to women has changed the way that the pressure is built up. Whereas, 50 years ago, it's not that there wasn't pressure, but that pressure may not have felt quite as accessible to a 10 or 12-year-old, whereas now you're getting inundated with it at such a much younger age, and also the availability to alter it, whether that's through like filters on your phone or whether that is through cosmetic surgery or whatever, is so much more available now. So I think, speaking for my generation, like having grown up with that, I think that's a lot of where the pressure comes from.
Yeah.
I remember when, this was just a few years ago, when they decided that Barbie was the reason women my age had such a bad body image. And I thought, not once did I ever look at Barbie and go, that's the ideal.
Right.
It was hearing from the women in my life not being satisfied with their own bodies.
Yeah.
And we have picked that up. I was listening to a friend this weekend, and she's beautiful. She's not perfect, but all of her insecurities, she was like, well, I just look this way, I look this way. And I thought, wow, it hasn't stopped. And how much of that, we blame it on culture and all, like, whatever. How much of it is actually driven by us as women? We're the ones creating that content.
Yes.
We're the ones saying, this is what you should desire, men, so go after that. And then we get into this cycle of, well, men desire that, so now I need to be that. And we just keep pointing them to that. So how much of that do we have to own?
And how much of it do we choose to accept?
Yeah.
Because we can choose not to go along with what the culture says. God says we have that option. His word says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we have this frame that he created that is made of steel, is kind of the indication of the word in the Hebrew. And so where do we kind of need to take that responsibility and go, we don't have to choose to believe those things any longer, because we have a higher standard. We have a better standard that we can look to, which is the Lord and his word.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I think it's getting there. That is the hardest part, because you're right. It is I'm with you. It was the women in my life talking about their bodies, and magazines. I think that was a big thing too. And to an extent TV, but how do we move from this is what culture says, but this is what the word says on the other side? How do we move from one to the other? That's a weighty process. That's hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's again, I think a lot of it's just contentedness with knowing that the Lord created you the way that he did on purpose. And that is not to say that you do not take responsibility for stewarding your body well.
No.
But it also means that there are things about you that were created uniquely for you, and all of which reflect the Creator. But how do we get to that? Like, I can say that, and I know it's true, but how do I get my heart to start believing that when I also see this other thing that's pulling me back in the other direction, which is the enemy going, hey, but look at this. How do I do that?
Yeah.
That's hard.
I think the answer might be remove all mirrors from everywhere.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I'm game. I'm game. If y'all tell me if my hair looks bad, I'm good.
There is something to that. I mean, you had your own, you mentioned this, Jess, you 20, 30, 40 years ago, you had just your town to compete against. Now you have every single woman in every single part of the world. That's unbearable.
Yeah.
That's impossible. Like, I cannot compete against Miss Brazil.
That's a lot of competing.
I can't. There's no way. And so, I think knowing it does come down to, do you really believe what God says?
Yes.
Do you
It is a
know what
belief
God
issue.
says? Yeah. And so confronting that fear and asking the Lord, I think a long time ago, he gave me a prayer of, help my heart believe what my mind knows to be true.
Yes.
And I have to continually ask
Yeah.
that, because my heart is deceitful above all else.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think John said the other week, maybe it was Nicole, I don't know, in one of their sermons, like, the longest 18 inches in the world is from your head to your heart.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, connecting those things. Like, I can know the truth, but to let it really sink in and take root in my life is hard. It's hard to do. And it requires weeding out lies, but replacing those lies with truth. You
Yeah.
can't just like weed out a lie or another lie is going to grow. You got to
Yeah.
replace it with something
Yeah.
that's
You
true.
can't just stop
Absolutely.
smoking and not replace it with
exactly.
something.
Well, but I want to say too, like, as we're talking about body image, a lot of times I think when we have this conversation, we think of it only in terms of how we look. But I also think this conversation includes the way that our body functions, because there are so many women that I know and love who are frustrated with their bodies, less because of how they look, but more because they're sick, or they are struggling with infertility, or they have some kind of chronic illness or pain, and there's just this
Great point.
frustration with their flesh, and it has little to do with how they look, but so it's still a part of this conversation about what is the role that our body plays, in our life and in God's story for us. So I think that's part of this conversation too.
Yeah, and I think that's speaking on infertility specifically, because some family members have dealt with that pretty harshly. But I think just in general, like it's difficult to put yourself in Paul's shoes, for example, right? Knowing you have some sort of whatever it is, affliction or something like that, something that you feel like you should be able to do, or that you see others being able to do, and you don't understand why that gift is not given to you for some reason. And I think the hardest piece of it is not knowing the why, which we don't get to know the why a lot of the times, but still finding contentedness in it all, which, again, beautiful thing to say. So hard to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's a daily reminder of what you said, Sarah, where it's not that you suddenly reach a point where, and correct me if I'm wrong in your experience, but you don't just reach a point where you're like, great, I'm good now. I feel great about everything. It's every single day reminding yourself, God has a plan and a purpose for whatever it is. He is going to use me in whatever way that he has intended. And it's a good thing if we can reach that point. So remind ourselves that he is in control and he has a good plan for us. I think every single day you almost have to say that to yourself, so that it is ingrained beyond just my head knows it, but like my heart believes it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, so as the person here on the younger end of the spectrum at the table here, I would love to ask Rebecca, like, as you have grown in age but also in wisdom, how has this changed for you? Like the contentment, just the issue of body image, like, talk to me, because you have more wisdom than I do, so I want to know what I'm headed for.
So I think every young girl, every woman could go back and think through, at what point did I stop viewing myself as the perfect little princess? Like we were all ballerinas. We were all, we were perfect. Our parents thought we were perfect, all that stuff. And so sometimes you have to go back and go, at what point did that change for me? Was there a moment of some sort of rejection or some sort of comment? And for me, I think I remember thinking back, one of the first times that I ever realized this. As a younger person, I was very active all the time. And in school even, like by the time I hit middle school, I was involved in gymnastics and cheerleading and those kinds of things. And I remember, because I was kind of muscular, I was never tiny, but I was very muscular. And I remember a boy that I thought was cute said to me, "You got man arms." Like talking about my arms. And I thought, well, there you go. I can never go sleeveless again. But I do recall that moment. And for years, I didn't show my arms anywhere. I let some crazy 14-year-old boy tell me. I think he's in prison now. So, it doesn't matter. Actually, I do think he is. But in any case, there's a moment where you start then to go, oh, maybe I'm not perfect. And so then you start, it goes way back before. I go back to the fall. Genesis 3 is where, it all went pear-shaped. And so because we have an enemy, there's going to be other people that come along, well-intentioned or not, who might make comments to you. I remember right after I married Greg, my mother-in-law said, she looked at some wedding pictures of us years later, and I was probably in my, well into my 40s by that point. And she goes, "Look at us." She said, "We were chubby then." And I was like,
Wow.
"Okay. Where's the pizza?" Like, I'll show you, chubby. But that commentary that comes, and then it starts the tape that rolls over and over and over, and then we start, and we continue that throughout life. That early thing was probably a moment, but the commentary that we make to each other. So be careful. There's life in words. And so we should be super, super careful about the things we say to one another, and certainly the things we say to young girls, because they're starting to worry about these things younger and younger.
Yes.
And so last thing in the world a 6-year-old needs to worry about is whether or not she's, skinny or fat. Never should those things. But if we go back and we look at that, then we can kind of put into words, okay, that's where maybe it started. And so that's where I can start doing that replacing of, you know what? I don't have man arms. And if I do, so what? I have the arms God gave me, and they can carry things, and, I can use them. And so praise God for those man arms, or whatever the arms are, And so if we can dig backward a little bit, even if it's a little bit painful, then you can start to kind of compile that picture. And I know that as I got a little bit older, by the time I hit about 30, I started getting real comfortable in my skin. And I thought, well, I'm not the best out there, but I'm not the worst either, So move on about your life, girl, quit acting like, everything has to be perfect before you can move forward in anything, but that's also the time when God began to teach me about what my identity was, and it's not wrapped up in how I look. It's not wrapped up in how much I weigh or don't weigh. It's not any of those things. It's who He says I am. It's who Jesus died for me to be. And so when we can get there is when we start to make real headway of, okay, I don't have to listen to the voices in my ear, the world, the flesh, and the devil, which don't have your best interest, at all. What I can do is search for the truth in His Word, through His people, through worship, through prayer, all that stuff. I can search for those things, and I can cling to that, and I can choose to believe that. It always comes back to belief. What do you believe? Do you believe God says the right things, or do you believe other people do?
I like what you said about it starting the tape. Because we all were like, "Oh yeah," and that's making me
right. You're going.
"Oh, we
I
all
have that. I
that."
know. As soon as I thought, it wasn't. I was little, but I saw a picture of myself when I was little in this gold bathing suit, and when I wore it, I didn't think anything about it because I was cared less. But when I got a little older and I saw myself in it, and I thought, "You chubby little piece of crap," and that's what stuck was how embarrassed I was because I looked
in that little
that way.
gold suit.
It was so tacky, but I when I was little, I thought this was the most amazing thing ever. I felt like Jim from Jim and the Rock Stars. But I that's the vision that comes into my head, and you think, yep, and it just continues to build. And whew.
Yeah. God wants to end all that, though. He wants us to see ourselves as He sees us. And that physically is just one of those ways. And it seems to be the lowest on the spectrum, but it's the thing that gets elevated to sometimes the highest.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have an 8-year-old, and I'm just thinking through like the things that she thinks and the things that she'll say. Where she came out one day, just in a tank top and a sweater and some shorts, and she said, "Mom, do I look like a high schooler?" And I was like, "No, we're not going to go there yet." But also I was like, she's 8 and she's already looking at these girls going,
Thinking about
I
it.
want to look like that.
Yep.
And am I doing enough to model and also
Mm-hmm.
speak truth into
Yep.
who she actually is, regardless of what she ever looks like? It was convicting because I was like, do I model that well enough for her to go, well, I may not be perfect, but that's because we're in an imperfect world right now. But I love who God made me to be, and you should too, so it was very convicting.
Sometimes if you haven't been as confident in that area, it will teach you and train you as you get older to make sure that you speak right words
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah.
You know, when my grandchildren came along and they started saying things like that, I would say, you are perfect. You are perfect. You are right where God has you. You know, and so it was a real reminder to me to not continue that cycle or that generational piece of you need to look better somehow, you know, to be acceptable.
Right. Yeah.
It's reclaiming that word perfect.
Absolutely.
I mean, truly, because what we would create in our own humanness as perfect is such a piece of junk compared to what God calls perfect.
Yeah.
When you search scripture,
Yeah.
you look at Moses, who was an idiot and who had a stammer and was a coward, and God said, you are perfectly suited for this position because I will make you that.
Right.
And so
and
that,
depend on you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, there's a lot of pressure. Women put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make sure that we're, you know, it's all on us to do that. And maybe starting to have those conversations with the men in our lives, husbands, whatever, to say, hey, you need to know how important this is. And just opening that door to going, this is what's helpful. This is what isn't. With your daughters too, going, they're looking at you. Do you know? Because they may not have those conversations with one another to know how important it is,
Right.
or even how to have that conversation with women
Right.
to tell us like what is okay to say, what isn't.
Yeah.
Because they're under such attack now of what they can and cannot say. So there's a little bit of I don't want women to feel like it's all on them, because it's not.
Sure.
It's a heavy burden, but we don't need to ever feel like we're the only ones who have to carry that, because that's just a tactic of the enemy to kind of isolate you and make you feel alone and defeated. So
I think
Which is always his plan.
always,
Oh,
he doesn't
absolutely.
change. He's not unique.
He's pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah,
Not very creative.
he's not creative, and I hate that I still fall for it.
we all do. I know. I
Oh,
know.
it's the same thing. It feels like Charlie Brown in the football. I'm like, oh, son of a gun, I did it again. Every time.
Pulled it right out from under you. Yeah.
Well, and the other piece of this, which Rebecca, you talked about this too, but us speaking into each other and encouraging each other in the moments where we are feeling less secure or we're struggling with believing that what we know is true, I think is just as important. Like we're going back to the friendship episode a little bit here, but the community that you have, the people in your life that are your best people that the Lord has called to be there are going to say the things that will lead you the right direction.
Yeah.
They're not going to lead you away from it. So they're not going to encourage the superficial or encourage the sadness or whatever it is that you're feeling about that. They're actually going to point out the beautiful things and the things that the Lord's created. So finding that is so important too.
Yeah, because so often we believe lies about ourselves that we wouldn't let our friends believe.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if one of you said something derogatory about yourself, I would jump on that in an instant. But the odds that I believe that about myself are probably pretty high.
Right.
And that's so dumb. That's such a stupid double standard. But we need those people in our life. I think there's a quote from Bonhoeffer in his book Life Together where he says, the Christ in the mouth of my brother or sister is stronger than the Christ in my own heart.
Yes.
Which is not to say that it's not the same Jesus, but it is to say that when you look me in the eyeballs and you tell me a truth, sometimes it's a little bit easier and a little stronger for me to believe that when it comes out of the mouth of somebody that knows me and loves me than it is from inside me where I am weak and struggling.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, when you said I have a quote, I was thinking you were going to quote Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman when she said the bad stuff's easier to believe. I was waiting for it, and then you pulled out Bonhoeffer.
Hey,
of course.
that's good too. That's good too.
By the way,
Balance.
used a body double for her scenes.
No way.
Really?
Yes.
No
Because
way.
she knew not to play that
Yes.
game.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow.
So even Julia
See?
Roberts is a little insecure.
Man.
You know?
Wow.
So
Crazy.
That's a fun
Yep.
fact.
So
Nobody's
I'm
got it all
quoting
together.
movie prostitutes, and you're quoting
oh dear. Bonhoeffer.
Bonhoeffer. It's great.
I love it.
That's hilarious.
That was fully expected and so on brand for both of you, though. That's
right.
And that's my favorite thing.
Oh boy.
I said balance. We need both.
Oh my gosh. That's true, though. We have so much grace for other people and
Yeah.
none for ourselves.
I have none.
I don't know why.
Zero.
Yeah.
About the way I walk, the way I talk, the way I hold myself. I caught myself driving yesterday and I was all hunched over and I thought, you haggard piece of junk, sit up straight.
Oh my word.
Oh, that was your mother's
Driving.
voice in your
Yes.
head. Sit up
Yes.
straight.
A little
Hold
bit.
your shoulders back.
Yeah, a little bit. But I mean, it just, even that I thought, I'm so afraid that someone will see me driving and I'll look like a bridge troll. Who cares? People literally pick their noses in their car and I'm worried about hunched over. It's so stupid.
I was gonna say I look like an idiot in my car. I'm singing at the top of my lungs with full hand gestures.
That's right.
But it just goes to show, like, even those little things, and you think, if an alien were to drop in right now, they would look at you and go, sis, this ain't it.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
But I mean, we're so hard on ourselves. Like that's
Well, we
you're saying
believe the
those
lies
things
of our
and-
culture
Yeah.
and the lies of our enemy, both of which are very similar. The lies of our culture are thou shalt be thin and thou shalt not age. Our American culture particularly struggles way more than many other cultures in that respect. You know, it's why we have an over $350 billion fitness and cosmetic surgery and dieting industry in play in our country. You know, 350 billion with a B. That's how many times people buy into that, okay, I got to have help with doing something
Yeah.
differently because I don't measure up in some way.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And
It's a
I'm thinking,
lot.
like, some of the most beautiful women that I just think are incredible. I think of Dame Judi Dench, who's,
Yeah.
she's incredible and hasn't ever done it. You know, she's just who she is. Or, what's the,
Julie Andrews?
oh, I do love her.
That's not
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Ah, yes.
And Knives Out. And you just think, you've done it, sis. Like, she looks incredible. But what they've done is they show a confidence in this is who I am.
That's the beautiful thing. That I think that's what we keep getting back to, though. It's the insecurity that everyone deals with that ends up dragging us down through all of the different roads that we're chasing after, which are not going to lead to anything good. But on the flip side of that, the confidence is what actually makes people beautiful.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't have anything to do with the superficial, surface
Yeah.
level stuff.
Yeah, and that confidence, kind of like what you were saying earlier, is just this. It's not cockiness. It's like a
No.
quiet confidence of it. It comes with humility, but it's the comfort. Like I'm comfortable in who God made me to be.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this.
And that comfort
Yeah.
isn't, I've given up. I think
Yeah.
that's what sometimes you
No,
think,
no,
I'm
no.
just so comfortable that
hope
it's
we
almost
don't
like takes
give
a
up.
slothful tone is how it's kind of become. And I'm just comfortable. But that's not it. It's totally different.
Yeah. I have a hard time imagining. I mean, I would love to be in a contentedness place where I'm just perfectly happy, but being comfortable and all of that, I can't imagine.
I can't. That's what, when people pass away, I thought about this with Dad, and I thought, he is completely complete. Like, imagine that. Not just his body is finally renewed. He is face to face with his Creator, and no more anxiety, no more fear, no more regrets. Yeah. No more mental anguish. We don't have the concept of that.
Right.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but we trust that promise. We trust that
Yes.
promise that there's a glorified body
Yes.
that's coming our way someday. You know, mine is that girl from the Avatar movies. I'm going to be 10 foot tall blue with glow in the dark green freckles is what I'm going to be.
that's your ideal. Love that for you.
I'm 5'3", and you know,
I'll paint some glow in the dark paint on
So
your face
far
for the
from that.
summertime.
it'd be all right. Yeah.
But I love, Sarah, I love that you use the word redeemed. And I love, Rebecca, that you're talking about like our glorified bodies in heaven, because that's proof. Like it is proof. Like when Romans 8 talks about the redemption of our bodies that we're longing for, is that what Christ did on the cross and in his resurrection was not ultimately for us to escape our bodies, but for our bodies to one day be redeemed.
Right. Yeah.
The goal is not to get out of these old things.
Right.
The promise is that one day the best version of this is coming.
Yeah.
The way it was supposed to be before
Yeah.
we decided we were God.
Well, notice that in Scripture, God does not tell you what that body's going to look like.
Right.
You know, we might be a little surprised.
Yeah, it
You
can
know,
probably
in
do some
way.
stuff that
But
these
what we
can't.
do know is we will be impervious to disease. We will not age in the same way. We won't fatigue in the same way. We won't use our bodies in wrong ways. You know, all of that. That is a glorified body. You know, so he never says what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
You know, so do your best, take care of it here because you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's such a
so-
great promise.
It is
To hold
It is
on
the
to.
promise to think through.
Yeah.
You
and
know that.
there's so much hope in that, like, especially going back to what you were talking about, Lydia, where we do struggle with affliction this side of heaven. The promise of what a relationship with the Lord not just gives us, but how it redeems us. Like that, I don't know. There's makes me want to cry a little bit because I'm like, oh, there's a lot of hope in that, which is wonderful, and it makes you just look all the more to heaven.
Yeah.
I have a question, Rebecca. How have you then, knowing all of this, how has the Lord taught you these things, and how have you learned these things throughout the years, and how have you given those over? How have you sacrificed those hurts or those just insecurities? What is that process over time?
I'm so glad you asked that. So staying grounded in his word, rooted to his word, because his word is fresh every day.
Yeah.
The Bible calls it living and active. It changes every time we read it. And so every now and then you'll be reading passages of scripture that you've read 100 times and something leaps out at you. You know, we've all read Psalm 139 probably 100 times. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. I knew you in the secret place. I formed you there. I made your frame while it was hidden in the secret place. I remember one time reading that and seeing that word frame, and I thought, what does that mean? Because it was at a time in my life where the fear I had was that you're weak.
Yeah.
You know, that's a lie the enemy wants to speak into all of us. You're just weak. If I weren't so weak, I'd be thinner.
Yeah.
If I weren't so weak, I'd be this or that, or I would do this or that, right? And so I went and did a word search on that word frame. And in the Hebrew, that word, yes, of course, means skeletal structure, all that stuff. But it's also a steely resolve that God places in the middle of us. Our core is made of steel. That's the way he designed us, right? And so in learning that, I thought, I need to believe him. He says I'm not weak.
Yeah.
I'm going to believe him in that. And it eliminated several fears in that moment, you know, not just regarding the physical side of life, but also spiritual lies I'd believed, emotional damage that had, you know, been in play in my life, all of that. So stay rooted in that word. You know, you're going to learn something new every time you open it up. You know, that's one of the things that I think has been so glorious about being retired a little bit. You know, you make your own schedule, which is absolutely glorious. But to have the time to stay in the Word and be there as much time as I want to and long to, and to let Him just teach me fresh, you know, at 62 years old, you know. And so He keeps showing up and teaching me all those things. So stay rooted in that. He is faithful. He will come alive and alongside of us. You know, so that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, choose to, whatever he teaches me, I'm gonna believe. Listen, this is my whole apologetic in life anyway. You know, it's very simple. Y'all might want to get a pencil and a piece of paper and write this down. Guy rises from the dead, I believe everything he says.
Yeah.
Fair.
Simple.
Amen.
Yeah.
So if he says it, I'm gonna believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and what he says is, I am so crazy about you. I have you tattooed on my hand. I'm so crazy about you that you're the apple of my eye. In Esther, he says, the king is enthralled with your beauty. You know, he sings over us. He thinks we're so amazing, right? So let's believe those truths. That is truth.
Yeah.
You know, we know the rest of the junk we're believing is
Yeah.
lie. You know, it may sound true. You know,
Yeah.
that's the you know, brilliance that the enemy has, is he makes the lies about us sound true. You know, because we can go, oh, yeah, that might be true.
Yeah.
None of which is true, stacked up against what God says about us. Let's choose to believe that instead.
That'll preach.
Amen. It's like, well, on that note, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I cannot think of a better way to wrap up today. No. That's the mic drop right there.
I'm here all week, y'all.
Oh my gosh.
Try the veal.
It was a joy. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you
and
for
talking to
asking
us.
me.
Thank you,
It's
Rebecca.
been
This
fun.
been
Fun to see
amazing.
you all too.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, we will catch you guys on the next episode of the Tell Me More podcast.